Hey, it's Casey Orr and Sean Whitfield with iTruckTV.com. It's time for your NASCAR update, and we're going to get you up to speed. It's Casey Orr and Sean Whitfield with Valvoline Racing Radio, and we're keeping you up to speed for iTruckTV.com. And NASCAR, one of the 2 times in the year we make left and right-hand turns, Sean. It was a great race at Watkins Glen that saw bad news for Marcos Ambrose and a dramatic late race battle for the win that went to Kyle Busch.
That it did. Getting in our second road course race of the 2013 NASCAR Sprint Cup Series up in Watkins Glen, New York. It is one of those racetracks that always puts on a good show. Very fast, a lot of turns, and you always manage to see a few cars in the wall or some scrap sheet metal on the racetrack.
In the last couple of years, Marcos Ambrose really has stepped up and pretty much cemented himself as maybe the best driver in the series when it comes to Watkins Glen. Always performs well at road courses, but he had won the last 2 races here, Sean. He shows up this weekend, gets the Coors Light pole, goes out and leads 51 laps, but gets caught going onto pit road right before the caution comes out, ends up putting him back in the pack of the field. Then his car breaks. He has a bad end of the race, ends up finishing in the 30s. In fact, he finished 31st. But that, when someone has a bad break, it was a good break for someone else. In this case, it was Kyle Busch.
That's right. Kyle Busch took advantage of the mistakes from Marcos Ambrose as well as a few other top drivers, and Kyle Busch got his 27th victory in 315 NASCAR Sprint Cup Series races. This is his 3rd victory and 14th top 10 finish in 2013. Going down the results of the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series, a Cheez-It 355 at the Glen. In 2nd spot, Brad Keselowski. 3rd was Martin Truex Jr. 4th, Carl Edwards. 5th was Juan Pablo Montoya. 6th was Clint Boyer. 7th, Joey Logano. 8th, Jimmy Johnson. 9th, Kurt Busch. And 10th, A.J. Allmendinger.
Some other drivers of note: Kevin Harvick 13th, Max Pappas, who was filling in for the injured Tony Stewart, in 15th, Danica Patrick, a top 20 at her first shot at the Glen. Dale Earnhardt Jr. gets involved in a late race wreck, Sean. He finishes 30th. Marcos Ambrose led the race high 51 laps, finished 31st. Casey Kane 34th, and Jeff Gordon, who had spent the last few weeks inching his way up in the point standings, he gets involved in a wreck early, Sean, finishes 36th. Except for Jimmy Johnson in 8th, it was a bad day for Hendrick as their drivers came in 30th, 34th, and 36th. But leave it to Jimmy to be the only one in the top 10.
But you know, some other teams that had a good run, and we mentioned A.J. Allmendinger in 10th spot. That is a race team that hadn't had too many top 10 finishes in 2013, especially A.J. Allmendinger's filling in place of Bobby Labonte in that team.
Yeah, it's the first time we've seen the 47 up that high. It was a great run by A.J.
All right, there were 8 caution flags for 21 laps and 5 lead changes among 5 drivers. After Watkins Glen, we'll move into the drivers' standings in the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series, and Jimmy Johnson continues to lead by a large margin of 75 points over 2nd place Clint Boyer. In 3rd is Carl Edwards, 4th Kevin Harvick, 5th is Kyle Busch, 6th Dale Earnhardt Jr., 7th Matt Kenseth, 8th Brad Keselowski, 9th Greg Biffle, and 10th Martin Truex Jr.
In the 11th spot, Sean, Kurt Busch still doesn't have the victory, but he's driven up to 11th in the points. 12th, Casey Kane. However, if the chase were to start today, Casey Kane does have a victory. He would take 1 wild card spot, and you got to go down to 14th place, Ryan Newman. He also has a victory. He would take the 2nd wild card spot. Tony Stewart fell to 17th. He has a victory. No shot at making the chase, Sean. He's going to be out several weeks, if not the rest of the year, with his broken leg. But Jeff Gordon was top 10 last week, fell all the way to 13th. However, only about 20 points separate 9th from 13th. Still a lot of moving and shaking to be had in the Sprint Cup Series standings with only 4 races left to go.
It's the top NASCAR headline news story of the week is the fact that Austin Dillon will be driving the number 14 car in place of Tony Stewart coming up this weekend for the Pure Michigan 400. And of course, you can catch that race coming up on Sunday on ESPN, and that is at Michigan International Speedway. That does it for this week's Up to Speed on iTruckTV.com. You can find us at Valvoline Racing Radio Mondays and Thursdays at 6 p.m. That's in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and that is also Eastern Time. You can also find us at iHeartRadio. That does it for this week's Up to Speed on iTruckTV.com.
Right here on the NASCAR Update at iTruck TV, where Sean and I keep you up to speed.